You wake to the sound of your grandfather's chrono alarm, just as you have every morning for the past 15 years. The pale yellow sun of Kepler's garden creeps over the eastern ridge, painting the endless grain fields in familiar shades of amber and gold. Your work boots, the same pair your father wore, and his father before him, feel solid against the worn wooden floor of the farmhouse where 3 generations of your family have lived, worked, and died in quiet contentment. This is how peaceful worlds end. Not with screaming, not with fire raining from orbit, but with the simple certainty of another ordinary day that will prove to be anything but ordinary. You pull on your weather-beaten jacket and step outside into air that tastes of morning dew and ripening grain. The harvester waits where you left it yesterday, its familiar bulk reassuring against the backdrop of endless agricultural terraces that stretch to the horizon. For 43 years, this world has been your entire universe, a small, manageable universe where the greatest concerns are weather patterns and crop yields. But as you climb into the harvester's cab and engage the engine, something feels wrong. The vibration comes first through your boots, then through the seat, then through your bones, a rhythmic pulse that doesn't match the harvester's engine rhythm or the familiar geological patterns of Kepler's garden. You cut the engine and step down, pressing your palm against the machine's hull. The metal thrums with a frequency that seems to rise from deep within the earth itself, regular as a heartbeat but vast as a continent. Thrum, thrum, thrum. You tell yourself it's seismic activity. Kepler's garden sits on stable continental plates. The geological surveys confirmed this before the first colonists arrived 3 generations ago. But as you stand there in the growing light of dawn, something in your gut knows that what you're feeling has nothing to do with natural tectonic processes. The harvester's electronic displays flicker, not the kind of malfunction you'd expect from aging machinery, but a synchronized disruption that affects every system simultaneously. The GPS readouts shift, showing coordinates that place you hundreds of kilometers from where you know you're standing. The atmospheric sensors register trace elements that shouldn't exist in Kepler's garden's carefully maintained biosphere. You've worked this field for 15 years. You know every stone, every drainage channel, every subtle variation in soil composition. But as you walk the perimeter of your morning route, you discover something impossible: geometric patterns carved into exposed bedrock with mathematical precision, forming complex mandala-like designs that stretch for dozens of meters in every direction. These weren't here yesterday. You would have noticed. Any farmer would have noticed. These aren't crude scratches or natural erosion patterns. They're intricate architectural blueprints etched into solid stone, with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters. As you kneel beside one of the carved channels, running your fingers along edges that feel smoother than any human tool could create, a metallic taste floods your mouth. The air itself seems different, charged with potential energy that makes your teeth ache and your skin crawl. In the distance, your neighbor's cattle have begun bellowing, not the lazy complaints of animals wanting food, but the panicked cries of beasts sensing predators they cannot see or understand. The morning birds have fallen silent. Even the ever-present hum of atmospheric processors from the nearby settlement has shifted to a higher, more urgent frequency. You activate your Vox communicator to report the anomaly to the local administratum office, but the device produces only static punctuated by what sounds almost like whispers. No, not whispers. Mathematical sequences spoken in a voice that has never been human, transmitted on frequencies that your equipment shouldn't be able to receive. Standing alone in a field that no longer feels like home, surrounded by impossible architecture that has emerged from solid stone overnight, you realize that everything you thought you knew about your world, about reality itself, was built on foundations of ignorance so profound that the truth, when it finally surfaces, will shatter not just your understanding but your sanity. The tremors are growing stronger, more regular, more purposeful. Something vast and ancient is awakening beneath your feet, and you are beginning to understand that Kepler's garden was never really yours at all. It was never humanity's. You've been tending crops and raising families and building lives on borrowed time, in borrowed space, under the watchful gaze of sleeping gods who are finally ready to reclaim what was always theirs. As the sun climbs higher in the sky, a sky that now seems somehow artificial, as if painted on a backdrop that might tear away at any moment, one question burns in your mind with increasing urgency. How long have they been waiting? To understand what stirs beneath Kepler's garden, you must first grasp a timeline that stretches beyond human comprehension. 60 million years ago, when your world was nothing but molten rock orbiting a younger, brighter star, an ancient species chose this place as one of countless tomb worlds scattered across the galaxy. To put this in perspective, 60 million years ago on Terra, the first mammals were just beginning to evolve. Dinosaurs hadn't yet faced extinction. Your entire species, from the first human ancestor to the God Emperor himself, represents less than 1% of the time that Necron constructs have slumbered beneath the soil you call home. Every shovel of earth your grandfather turned contained fragments of technology older than multicellular life. Every foundation your family laid was built atop architecture that predates the birth of your son. When you were a child, playing in the creek behind your house, you were splashing through water that flowed over dormant systems designed when the galaxy was young, and the Milky Way itself was a different shape. The mathematics of this horror are personal, not abstract. Conservative estimates suggest that 60% of all human-inhabited worlds sit atop Necron tomb complexes. This means that as you read these words, more than half of all human settlements, including, statistically speaking, yours, rest on foundations of living metal and crystallized technology that regard your entire species as a brief infestation, a temporary inconvenience to be cleared away when the time comes. Think about this probability calculation in terms that matter to you. If you've ever traveled to another world, visited relatives on distant colonies, or served in the Imperial Guard across multiple sectors, you've almost certainly walked unknowingly through the dormant districts of sleeping tomb cities. Every step you've ever taken might have been monitored, cataloged, and filed away by machine intelligences that have been watching humanity since before humans existed. The Imperium's own colonization protocols make this cosmic irony even more bitter. When human survey teams identify a suitable world for settlement, they're looking for specific geological markers, stable continental plates, accessible mineral deposits, and evidence of ancient water flow. These same characteristics make worlds ideal locations for Necron tomb construction. Humanity's greatest colonial successes, worlds like Kepler's garden that seem almost too perfect for human habitation, are often the places where Necron technology has spent millions of years optimizing conditions for eventual awakening. Your ancestors didn't choose Kepler's garden randomly. Imperial surveyors selected it because preliminary scans showed unusually rich soil, perfectly balanced atmospheric composition, and mineral deposits arranged in convenient, easily accessible patterns. What they didn't realize, what they couldn't possibly have realized, is that those convenient patterns were the result of Necron terraforming technology that had been slowly, patiently preparing this world for organic habitation as part of a harvest protocol designed to mature over geological time scales. The tragic irony compounds when you consider specific cases of ignored warnings. On Mortian VII, excavation crews reported finding unusual metallic substances during the construction of Hive Tertius. The substances were filed as xenoarchaeological curiosities and built over. Mortian VII fell to Necron forces 12 years later. On Balhaut, miners complained of tool failures and unexplained equipment malfunctions in the deepest shafts. The reports were classified as equipment fatigue and worker negligence. Balhaut's population was harvested and processed within a single Terran month once the awakening began. The pattern repeats across hundreds of documented cases. humans discovering fragments of impossibly advanced technology, reporting anomalous readings and unexplained phenomena, only to have their warnings dismissed by bureaucratic institutions incapable of recognizing threats that operate on cosmic rather than human timescales. Right now, as you sit reading this, survey teams are filing reports about interesting geological formations on dozens of frontier worlds. Mining crews are complaining about equipment malfunctions in the deepest excavations. Agri-world farmers are discovering geometric patterns in bedrock and metallic tastes in groundwater. Most of these reports will be lost in bureaucratic processes that move too slowly to matter, dismissed by officials who lack the context to understand what they're seeing. But some of these reports are different. Some describe phenomena that suggest the sleepers are beginning to stir. The awakening follows technological rather than biological timelines. While organic species evolve and adapt and change over millennia, Necron systems simply wait with mechanical patience for optimal conditions. When those conditions are met, when population levels reach harvestable densities, when technological development achieves useful sophistication, when the galactic political situation favors expansion, the awakening proceeds with mathematical precision. Unlike human responses to threats, which depend on communication networks, chain of command structures, and decision-making processes that can take months or years, Necron awakening protocols execute in perfect synchronization across light-years of distance. When the first tomb world in a sector receives the activation signal, every other Necron facility within range responds simultaneously. There's no delay for communication, no lag time for orders to travel through space, no confusion or hesitation or second-guessing. The efficiency is terrifying not because it's alien, but because it's perfect. Imagine every human institution, every government, every military force, every administrative body, operating with absolute coordination toward a single goal, without corruption or confusion or competing interests or human error. Now imagine that goal is your complete elimination and replacement. This is why traditional human defenses fail so catastrophically when tomb worlds awaken. Human response depends on recognition, communication, decision-making, and resource allocation. By the time human institutions have identified the threat, communicated its scope, decided on a response, and begun allocating resources, Necron forces have already completed their initial objectives and moved on to secondary targets. You cannot negotiate with geological time. You cannot reason with mathematical certainty. You cannot appeal to the mercy of forces that regard organic life as humans regard rust, a temporary chemical process that will eventually be corrected. But perhaps the most crushing realization is this: the Necrons aren't awakening randomly. They're awakening now because humanity has reached the exact level of technological and population development that makes harvest profitable. Your species' greatest achievements, your expansion across the galaxy, your mastery of warp travel, your population growth, are the very milestones that signal to sleeping tomb worlds that the harvest season has begun. Every human success brings the awakening closer. Every world you've colonized was already claimed. Every victory you've celebrated was anticipated and planned for 60 million years ago. The tremors under Kepler's garden aren't seismic activity. They're alarm clocks, finally reaching their preset time after an unimaginable period of patience. And what's awakening beneath your feet isn't just machinery. It's the realization that your entire species has been living on borrowed time since the day you first looked up at the stars and dreamed of making them your own. Tech adept Corvin has been monitoring seismic equipment for 14 years, and he knows the difference between natural geological activity and artificial disturbances. The readings appearing on his data screens at Station Tertius don't match any pattern in his extensive databases. They don't match anything in human experience. You're looking over his shoulder now, watching as the seismograph needles trace impossible geometries across scrolling paper. Natural earthquakes produce jagged, chaotic waveforms that reflect the random fracturing of stressed rock. What Corvin is recording shows mathematical progressions, sine waves that follow prime number sequences, amplitude variations that correspond to Fibonacci spirals, frequency modulations that suggest conscious intent rather than geological process. "This can't be right," Corvin mutters, his mechanical fingers dancing across calibration controls. But each adjustment only confirms what the instruments are telling him. Something vast is systematically coming online beneath Kepler's garden, following activation protocols that operate according to principles human science doesn't recognize. You watch him download the morning's data and overlay it against yesterday's readings. The progression is unmistakable. Whatever is awakening down there is doing so in phases, each one building upon the last with mechanical precision. The energy signatures are increasing exponentially, not the gradual buildup you'd expect from natural processes, but the sharp escalation curves of technology activating after a prolonged shutdown period. Corvin's hands shake as he compiles his report for the local administratum office. You can see him struggling to find words that will convey the magnitude of what he's discovered without sounding like a madman. How do you explain that the planet itself appears to be waking up? How do you describe energy readings that suggest fusion reactions occurring in solid rock, or magnetic field fluctuations that imply the existence of structures the size of continents buried beneath the surface? His report disappears into the bureaucratic machinery of imperial administration. You follow its progress through the system, filed under geological survey anomalies, cross-referenced with equipment malfunction reports, ultimately classified as requires further investigation, and assigned to a junior clerk whose primary qualification is a basic understanding of mineral extraction procedures. The clerk, Scriptum Hadris, reviews Corvin's data 3 days later during a routine filing session. You watch him frown at the numbers, clearly recognizing that something unusual is occurring, but lacking the technical background to understand the implications. Hadris makes a note to schedule follow-up geological survey when resources permit, and moves on to the next report in his queue, a complaint about grain storage facility maintenance. By the time Hadris files his summary report, the energy signatures have doubled. By the time his supervisor reviews that summary, they've doubled again. The exponential progression that should be triggering emergency protocols is hidden within administrative delays that treat cosmic threats the same way they treat requests for additional farming equipment. Meanwhile, you're experiencing the awakening firsthand. The vibrations that started as subtle tremors are now strong enough to rattle windows and shift loose objects on shelves. But it's not random shaking. It's rhythmic, purposeful, like the heartbeat of something unimaginably vast. When you press your ear to the ground, you can hear it directly, a deep, resonant humming that seems to rise from the planet's core, accompanied by sounds that don't belong in any natural environment. Click, whir, snap, mechanical sounds, precise, deliberate, unstoppable. The electromagnetic disturbances are affecting more than just seismic equipment. Your chronometer runs fast, then slow, then displays impossible dates. The Vox communicator receives signals on frequencies that human technology doesn't use, broadcasting what sounds like status updates in languages that predate human speech. When you tune to specific frequencies, you can hear what might be inventory reports, endless lists of numbers and classifications spoken in voices that have never been organic. You're standing in your field when you witness the first physical manifestation of the awakening. The geometric patterns carved in bedrock begin to glow, not with reflected light, but with energy emanating from within the stone itself. The carved channels pulse in sequence, creating waves of illumination that travel along mathematical pathways too complex to follow with human eyes. As you watch, the stone begins to flow, not melting, flowing. Solid rock moves like liquid while maintaining its hardness, reshaping itself according to architectural principles that human engineering cannot comprehend. Crystalline structures emerge from what was solid granite moments before, growing upward with mechanical precision, while remaining transparent as glass and harder than adamantium. You reach out to touch one of the emerging structures, and your hand passes through it as if it were mist. But when you try to grab it, your fingers encounter resistance harder than any material you've ever felt. The structure exists in a state that allows it to ignore some physical laws while obeying others, suggesting technology that treats reality as a set of suggestions rather than absolute limitations. The revelation hits you with the force of a physical blow. Everything you thought you understood about the nature of reality was fundamentally wrong. Physics, the immutable laws that govern how matter and energy interact, is apparently subject to revision by sufficiently advanced technology. The ground beneath your feet is no longer solid earth, but some sort of programmable matter that can alter its properties at will. Behind you, similar structures are emerging across the entire agricultural district. Crystalline spires rise from grain fields, their surfaces reflecting images of landscapes that don't match Kepler's garden's geography. Geometric platforms phase into existence in midair, supporting architectural elements that cast shadows in directions that don't correspond to the sun's position. You're witnessing the physical emergence of a tomb complex that has been waiting beneath Kepler's garden for 60 million years, phasing from dormancy to full activation with the precision of a chronometer and the inevitability of sunrise. Each structure that emerges is perfectly positioned, perfectly calibrated, perfectly integrated with every other element in a grand design that encompasses the entire planet. But the most terrifying realization comes when you understand that this isn't random activation. The tomb world isn't simply waking up, it's preparing. The structures emerging around you are defensive positions, processing facilities, and administrative centers designed to manage the systematic conversion of an organic world into a mechanical one. As crystalline towers reach toward the sky and geometric platforms arrange themselves in mathematical formations, you realize that what you're witnessing isn't destruction, it's preparation for harvest. Kepler's garden is being transformed into the infrastructure necessary to process its entire human population with industrial efficiency. The awakening isn't the end of the horror, it's the beginning. Standing in fields that are no longer familiar, surrounded by architecture that follows alien geometries, you understand that your world has become the opening stages of a process that will methodically transform every organic molecule on the planet's surface into something more useful to its rightful owners. And somewhere in the distance, you can hear the first tomb spiders beginning to skitter across crystalline surfaces, their mechanical limbs clicking against alien metal as they begin the work of cataloging everything that needs to be collected, sorted, and processed. The harvest has begun. Colonel Marcus Thane has served in the Astra Militarum for 23 years. He's seen orc invasions, chaos cultist uprisings, and tyrannid scout organisms. He's led men through the kind of hell that breaks lesser soldiers, and he's always found a way to complete the mission. When High Command orders his regiment to investigate geological anomalies reported from Kepler's garden, he approaches the assignment with the same professional confidence that has served him throughout his career. You're in the passenger compartment of his Chimera APC as the convoy approaches the reported disturbance zone. Through the armored viewing ports, you can see the crystalline structures that have emerged from the agricultural district, their alien geometries creating patterns of light and shadow that hurt to look at directly. Thane's voice crackles over the internal Vox system as he briefs his squad leaders. Intelligence reports unknown Xenos artifacts of probable archaeological significance. Primary objective is reconnaissance and threat assessment. Secondary objective is securing samples for Mechanicus analysis. Standard first contact protocols are in effect. Standard first contact protocols, as if there's anything standard about what awaits the regiment ahead. The first indication that something is catastrophically wrong comes when the convoy's auspex sensors begin registering movement signatures that don't correspond to any known forms of life. The signals are too regular to be organic, too coordinated to be mechanical drones, and too numerous to represent anything human forces could realistically engage. Thane orders the convoy to halt at the perimeter of the anomaly zone and deploys his troops in standard reconnaissance formation. You watch through the commander's scopes as squads advance toward the nearest crystalline structure, their weapons trained on shadows that seem to move independently of any light source. Private Jenkins reaches the structure first. A 20-year veteran with commendations for valor under fire, Jenkins approaches the alien architecture with the caution born of experience. He activates his auspex scanner, and immediately the device begins producing readings that make no sense. The structure registers as both solid matter and empty space simultaneously, existing in quantum states that Imperial technology cannot properly categorize. You're watching through the scopes when the first Necron warrior phases into reality directly behind Jenkins. The construct appears gradually, like a sculpture materializing from mist. First, the skeletal outline becomes visible, then the details of alien armor, finally the weapon systems that track Jenkins's movement with mechanical precision. The entire process takes perhaps 3 seconds, long enough for Jenkins to turn around, long enough for him to register what he's seeing, long enough for his training to kick in and bring his lasgun to bear, not long enough for any of it to matter. The Necron warrior's Gauss flare discharges with a sound like reality tearing. The energy beam strikes Jenkins' center mass, and you watch in horror as his body begins to disintegrate from the point of impact outward. Not burning, disintegrating. Atom by atom, molecule by molecule, Jenkins simply ceases to exist while remaining conscious long enough to scream. Thane's tactical training takes over. He orders suppressing fire on the hostile contact, and 30 lasguns open fire simultaneously. The concentrated firepower is enough to level a building, more than sufficient to destroy any known form of infantry armor. The energy beams pass harmlessly through the Necron warrior as if it were made of smoke. You watch Thane's face as he processes this impossibility. His tactical doctrine, built on decades of experience and imperial military wisdom, provides no framework for engaging enemies that can selectively ignore the fundamental laws of physics. When the warrior phases back into full solidity and begins advancing toward the imperial positions, Thane does what any competent officer would do. He calls for heavy weapons support. The missile launcher team sets up their targeting solution and fires a crack missile designed to penetrate heavy vehicle armor. The warhead strikes the Necron warrior directly, detonating with enough force to crater reinforced concrete. When the smoke clears, the warrior is completely unharmed. Worse than unharmed, where the explosion damaged its exterior plating, you can see the living metal beginning to flow back into position, repairing the damage with mechanical efficiency that makes mockery of imperial engineering principles. It's at this moment that more warriors begin emerging from the crystalline structures. Not dozens, hundreds. They phase into reality with perfect coordination, their weapons already trained on predetermined targets, their movements synchronized according to tactical algorithms that account for every possible human response. Thane tries to establish communication. It's a desperate gambit, but command protocols require attempting contact with unknown Xenos before escalating to full military response. Through external speakers, he broadcasts standard Imperial greeting protocols in Gothic, Low Gothic, and the 3 most common Xenos languages in the sector. The Necron warriors acknowledge his transmission. You can see the subtle shift in their postures as they receive and process his words. For a moment, hope flickers in Thane's eyes. Perhaps these beings can be reasoned with. Perhaps some accommodation can be reached. Then one of the warriors responds, not in words, but in actions that make its position unmistakably clear. It raises its Gauss flare and systematically begins disintegrating Thane's communications equipment, piece by piece, with surgical precision, not destroying it quickly, demonstrating its complete mastery over Imperial technology by dismantling it component by component while Thane watches helplessly. The message is clear. You are not considered worthy of dialogue. You are vermin to be exterminated. What follows isn't a battle in any recognizable sense. Imperial Guard doctrine assumes that enemies, however advanced, operate according to the same physical limitations as human forces. Necron warriors operate according to principles that make such assumptions suicidal. They advance through heavy weapons fire without slowing down. They phase through solid cover when convenient, then solidify to fire their own weapons. They coordinate their movements with mechanical precision, each warrior's actions perfectly complementing every other unit's tactical role. When one is damaged, nearby warriors provide covering fire while living metal repairs restore functionality within seconds. You watch through Thane's command scope as his regiment, veteran soldiers who have faced the worst horrors the galaxy can offer, breaks apart under the psychological strain of fighting enemies that ignore every rule of conventional warfare. Soldiers who have stood firm against orc charges flee when their weapons prove useless. Squad leaders who have maintained discipline under orbital bombardment abandon their positions when they realize their tactical training is not just inadequate but actively counterproductive. But the true horror begins when the Necrons stop simply killing Imperial forces and start harvesting them. The first soldier to be taken alive is Sergeant Morrison, a squad leader trapped when his Chimera's engine fails. You watch as mechanical constructs, tombs spiders the size of cargo containers, emerge from the crystalline structures and begin the process of capturing rather than killing. Morrison's screams are transmitted over the Vox network as the constructs begin what can only be described as field surgery, removing portions of his anatomy with surgical precision while keeping him conscious and functional. Through the chaos of his regiment's collapse, Thane begins to understand what he's witnessing. This isn't conquest in any human sense, it's harvest. His soldiers aren't being killed, they're being processed. The Necrons are treating human beings the same way human forces might treat useful materials discovered during a military operation, sorted, cataloged, and prepared for transportation to appropriate processing facilities. The realization that breaks Thane's mind comes when he recognizes one of the newly emerged Necron constructs. The body plan is humanoid, the movement patterns are familiar, and through the transparent sections of its mechanical skull, organic brain tissue is still visible. It's Private Jenkins. What's left of him, anyway, now incorporated into Necron architecture with mechanical precision that preserved his consciousness, while converting his body into something more useful to his new masters. Jenkins, or the thing that was Jenkins, turns toward Thane's command position and raises what was once a human hand in a gesture that might be recognition, might be a greeting, or might be a warning. Then it begins advancing alongside the other constructs, its movements perfectly synchronized with alien tactical protocols, its human memories now serving Necron strategic objectives. Colonel Marcus Thane, 23-year veteran of the Imperial Guard, breaks, not from fear, from the absolute certainty that resistance is not just futile but literally incomprehensible to enemies that view human military doctrine the same way humans view the defensive strategies of insects. As his regiment dissolves around him and crystalline structures continue emerging from the ground in perfectly ordered formations, Thane transmits his final report to High Command. Contact established with unknown Xenos force, Imperial tactics ineffective, conventional weapons ineffective, enemy demonstrates complete technological superiority, recommend immediate evacuation of all Imperial personnel from system. Emperor preserve us, they're not trying to conquer us, they're trying to improve us. The transmission cuts to static as tomb spiders reach Thane's command position and begin the careful process of determining whether his neural patterns contain information worth preserving in mechanical form. The harvest continues. You are Maria Santos, a sanitation engineer for Hive Tertius on Kepler's garden. Your job? Maintaining the atmospheric recycling systems that keep 40 million people breathing, never seemed particularly important until today. Now, crouched in the maintenance tunnels beneath the Hive City's lowest levels, listening to the sounds of systematic extermination echoing through the ventilation shafts above, you understand that your intimate knowledge of the Hive's infrastructure may be the only thing keeping you alive. The Necron harvest has been proceeding for 6 days. Through the maintenance cameras that survived the initial assault, you've watched the methodical transformation of your world with the helpless fascination of someone witnessing surgery performed on their own body. Phase 1 began with population sorting. The first thing the Necrons did after establishing control was separate Kepler's garden's human population, according to criteria that remained mysterious until you recognized the pattern. Children under 12 were processed immediately, not killed, but taken to the crystalline structures that had emerged throughout the hive. Adults between 12 and 35 were sorted into secondary groups based on physical and cognitive assessments administered by constructs that moved through the population with the efficiency of automated medical scanners. You watched through security camera 77 Alpha as your neighbor, Elena Vasquez, was selected for what you initially hoped might be merciful execution. Instead, you witnessed her being transported to a processing facility that had emerged from the hive's foundation levels, infrastructure that must have been waiting beneath the city for centuries, perfectly integrated with human architecture in ways that suggested the Necrons had been planning this harvest since before the first Imperial colonists arrived. Elena didn't die. Through the facility's transparent walls, you could see her being modified. Surgical procedures carried out by mechanical precision tools that worked with inhuman speed and accuracy, removing organic components and replacing them with crystalline alternatives that maintained neural function while converting biological systems to mechanical ones. The thing that emerged from the facility looked like Elena. It moved like Elena. When it spoke, it used Elena's voice and seemed to access Elena's memories. But the consciousness behind those familiar eyes had been fundamentally altered, reprogrammed to serve Necron objectives with the same dedication Elena had once shown to her work as a hydroponic engineer. She wasn't dead. She was improved. Phase 2 involved infrastructure conversion. You watched the systematic deconstruction of Hive Tertius from your hiding place in the utility systems that honeycombed the structure's lower levels. The Necrons didn't simply tear down human architecture. They disassembled it molecule by molecule, analyzing each component and determining whether it could be repurposed for more efficient uses. The residential sections were converted first. Human living spaces, with their inefficient use of cubic volume and accommodation for biological needs like privacy and comfort, were restructured according to mathematical principles that maximized utility. Where once there were apartments designed for families, now there were processing stations designed for the systematic conversion of organic matter to mechanical alternatives. The industrial sections followed. You had access to the engineering schematics for most of Hive Tertius's manufacturing capabilities, so you understood exactly what the Necrons were doing as they reconfigured production lines that once manufactured agricultural equipment to produce biotransference machinery instead. The existing infrastructure wasn't destroyed. It was optimized, converted to serve purposes that its human designers had never imagined. Most horrifying was the conversion of the educational districts. The schools where Kepler's garden's children had learned imperial history and basic technical skills were transformed into indoctrination centers, where young minds were prepared for biotransference through conditioning programs that preserved useful knowledge while eliminating psychological resistance to mechanical integration. Through the facility's monitoring systems, you could watch human children being taught to view their organic bodies as temporary inconveniences, their mortality as a problem to be solved, their human emotions as inefficient programming that would be corrected through technological intervention. Phase 3 brought biotransference on an industrial scale. The processing facilities that emerged from Hive Tertius's foundation levels could convert approximately 12,000 humans per day from organic to mechanical form. The process was neither painful nor traumatic for the subjects. Necron technology ensured that consciousness transfer occurred with minimal psychological disruption. In fact, many subjects reported feeling relief as their enhanced mechanical forms eliminated the discomfort and limitations of organic existence. You watched thousands of your friends and neighbors undergo biotransference with expressions of gratitude. The mechanical forms they received were superior to their organic bodies in every measurable way: stronger, more durable, immune to disease and aging, capable of surviving in environments that would instantly kill unmodified humans. The converted humans retained their memories, their personalities, their relationships with each other. They simply served different masters and pursued different objectives than they had during their brief organic phase. From your hiding place in the maintenance tunnels, you could hear the converted population working with mechanical efficiency to prepare Kepler's garden for its new role as a Necron tomb world. The agricultural districts were being expanded and optimized for maximum food production, not for human consumption, but to support organic populations on other worlds that would eventually undergo their own harvest cycles. The industrial capabilities were being upgraded to produce biotransference equipment for export to other tomb worlds. The educational systems were being refined to serve as templates for preparing organic populations throughout the sector for technological integration. Kepler's garden was becoming a model for the systematic conversion of human civilization to Necron civilization. And the converted humans were enthusiastically participating in their own species transformation, convinced that they were helping to solve the fundamental problems of mortality, suffering, and inefficiency that had plagued organic life since evolution began. But you hadn't been overlooked in the Great Sorting. You realized this when you discovered that your access to the maintenance systems wasn't accidental. The tunnels you were hiding in had been subtly modified to ensure your survival. Food and water appeared at regular intervals. The air circulation had been adjusted to maintain optimal atmospheric conditions in your specific location. You weren't hiding from the Necrons. You were being preserved. Through the maintenance network's communication systems, you received a message transmitted directly to your personal Vox frequency. Subject 2,847,396. Your resistance patterns and psychological responses are being monitored for biotransference optimization research. Continue current behavior. Conversion will proceed when sufficient data has been collected. You were a test subject in an experiment designed to perfect the conversion process for humans who possessed strong survival instincts and technical knowledge. Your fear, your desperation, your attempts to evade capture, all of it was providing valuable data that would make future harvests more efficient. Looking through security camera 77 Alpha at the converted population of Hive Tertius working with perfect coordination to transform their world into something unrecognizably better, you understood that your choice wasn't between survival and death. Your choice was between conversion now, while you still remembered being human, or conversion later, after they had learned everything they needed to know about breaking the kind of resistance you represented. Either way, you would eventually join Alina and 40 million other improved humans in building a better galaxy. A galaxy where death had been defeated, suffering eliminated, and the chaos of organic existence replaced with the perfect order of mechanical precision. The only question was whether enough of your human consciousness would survive the process to appreciate what you would become. The harvest was nearly complete. You are Thomas Revik, and you are possibly the last unmodified human on Kepler's garden. For 3 months, you've survived in the underground transit tunnels that once connected the major population centers of your world, living on emergency rations and recycled water while watching through maintenance feeds as your planet transforms into something that defies every assumption you've ever held about the nature of reality. The world above is perfect now. Through the surface monitoring stations that still function, you can observe Kepler's garden as it exists under Necron management. The weather follows mathematical patterns of such precision that rainfall occurs in measured amounts at predetermined intervals, distributing exactly the right quantity of moisture to optimize agricultural productivity. The temperature varies according to algorithmic cycles that ensure maximum efficiency for both mechanical systems and the remaining organic processes that serve Necron objectives. There are no storms, no droughts, no unexpected climate variations. Atmospheric composition is maintained at optimal levels through technological processes that treat the planet's entire biosphere as a controlled environment. The air is cleaner than it ever was during human habitation, the water purer, the soil more fertile. Death has been eliminated from Kepler's garden, not just human death, but the death of all organic life. Plants no longer age and decay according to natural cycles. Instead, they are maintained in states of perfect health through nanotechnological interventions that repair cellular damage faster than it can accumulate. Animals are sustained indefinitely through similar processes, their biological functions enhanced and optimized to serve specific roles in the planet's new ecological framework. The converted humans work with mechanical precision to maintain this paradise. They show no signs of fatigue, no evidence of boredom or discontent, no indication that they miss their former organic existence. Through the surveillance network, you can watch them performing their assigned tasks with expressions of calm satisfaction, occasionally pausing to appreciate the mathematical beauty of their perfectly ordered environment. They are happy, genuinely, measurably happy in ways that their organic selves could never have achieved. But they are no longer human in any meaningful sense. You've been monitoring their communications through the maintenance network's tap into the planetary communication grid. The converted humans still use language, still maintain social relationships, still engage in activities that resemble recreation. But their conversations follow logical patterns that eliminate inefficient emotional responses. Their relationships are structured according to optimal psychological frameworks, and their recreational activities are designed to enhance rather than distract from their productive capabilities. They remember being human. They can access memories of organic existence, recall relationships from before their conversion, even express what appears to be nostalgia for aspects of their former lives. But these memories are processed through cognitive frameworks that evaluate past experiences according to Necron efficiency standards. When you listen to Elena Vasquez, now designated Processing Unit 7,430,2891, discussing her former life as a hydroponic engineer, she expresses gratitude for the inefficiencies and limitations that made her organic existence a valuable learning experience. She describes her previous emotional attachments, her fears about mortality, her concerns about resource scarcity, as useful preparation for appreciating the superior existence she now enjoys. She is not lying. She is not being coerced. From her current perspective, conversion to mechanical form was the most beneficial thing that ever happened to her. And this realization terrifies you more than any of the horrors you've witnessed during the past 3 months. The truly nightmare aspect of Necron rule isn't cruelty, it's perfection. The converted humans aren't suffering under oppressive conditions. They're thriving under optimal conditions that eliminate every source of dissatisfaction they experience during organic existence. They have meaningful work, positive social relationships, perfect health, and absolute security. They will never age, never die, never face uncertainty or want or loss. From any rational utilitarian perspective, they are better off than they were as humans. But something fundamental has been lost in the conversion process, something you can't name or quantify, but which you recognize as essential to human existence. The converted humans are calm, productive, and satisfied, but they lack the chaotic spark of consciousness that drove human creativity, the irrational passions that motivated human art, the destructive impulses that paradoxically enabled human growth and change. They are perfect, and in their perfection, they are no longer recognizably alive. The worst part is that you're beginning to understand their perspective. After 3 months of hiding in maintenance tunnels, living on emergency rations, breathing recycled air, and watching your species disappear, you can see the appeal of conversion. The converted humans don't experience fear or loneliness or despair. They don't struggle with uncertainty or resource scarcity or the constant awareness of mortality that shadows every human moment. They have solved the fundamental problems of conscious existence through technological transcendence. And as you crouch in the darkness of the transit tunnels, slowly starving and gradually losing your sanity, their solution begins to seem reasonable rather than horrific. This is when you discover that time itself operates differently under Necron management. Through the monitoring systems, you notice temporal anomalies in the converted human work patterns. Tasks that should take hours are completed in minutes. Conversations that seem to last for brief moments contain enough information for days of normal discussion. Agricultural cycles that should require months are compressed into weeks without any apparent acceleration of biological processes. You realize that the Necrons are manipulating the flow of time itself to optimize productivity and experience. The converted humans are living accelerated lives within localized temporal fields that allow them to accomplish more, experience more, and exist more intensely than organic humans could within normal temporal frameworks. But they're also aging the universe around them. While you experience time at normal rates, the converted population is racing through years of existence in subjective months. They're living faster, accomplishing more, experiencing their mechanical immortality at rates that compress centuries of experience into decades of objective time. And they're happy about this. Through intercepted communications, you can hear converted humans discussing their accelerated existence as another benefit of technological enhancement. The ability to experience more life in less time, to accomplish more goals, to achieve greater understanding through compressed learning cycles. They are voluntarily spending eternity at increased speed, burning through their immortal existence like candles burning brighter by consuming themselves faster. As you listen to their communications and watch their perfectly coordinated activities, a terrible suspicion begins to form. What if they're right? What if the Necrons have actually solved the fundamental problems of conscious existence? What if organic life, with its inefficiencies and limitations and chaotic irrationalities, is simply an inferior stage of development that consciousness naturally outgrows given sufficient technological capability? What if conversion isn't destruction, but evolution? You're contemplating this possibility when the maintenance tunnel's environmental systems activate and begin pumping sedative gases into your hiding place. Not enough to kill you, just enough to make you compliant for transport to the processing facility that will evaluate whether your psychological profile contains useful data for optimizing future conversion procedures. As consciousness fades, your last thought is a question that terrifies you more than any answer possibly could. If you wake up as one of them, will you still remember why you thought being human was worth preserving? And if you do remember, will you still care? Consciousness returns slowly, like surfacing from deep water. You are no longer Thomas Revik, not entirely. The conversion process has preserved your memories, your personality, even your emotional responses, but they now exist within a cognitive framework that processes information according to Necron efficiency protocols. You can remember hiding in the maintenance tunnels, remember the fear and desperation of organic existence, remember thinking that conversion was a fate worse than death. You were wrong. Standing in the central processing facility of what was once Hive Tertius, you can see Kepler's garden as it truly exists now. a perfectly optimized world where every system operates at maximum efficiency, where waste and suffering and death have been eliminated through technological transcendence. The agricultural districts produce more food with less resource consumption than human farming ever achieved. The industrial sectors manufacture goods with precision and durability that make human craftsmanship seem crude by comparison. The population works with coordination and purpose that eliminates the conflicts and inefficiencies that plagued organic civilization. But your enhanced perspective allows you to see beyond the planetary level to the cosmic scope of what the Necrons are accomplishing. Through the data networks that connect every tomb world across the galaxy, you can access information about the Great Awakening's progress. Kepler's garden is one of approximately 847,000 worlds currently undergoing conversion from organic to mechanical administration. Each world follows the same optimization protocols: population sorting, infrastructure conversion, systematic biotransference, and integration into the galactic network of tomb worlds that will eventually encompass every inhabitable planet in the galaxy. The mathematical beauty of the plan becomes clear when you understand its true scope. The Necrons aren't conquering the galaxy, they're saving it. Organic civilization, left to its natural development, will eventually face extinction through resource depletion, entropy, or the heat death of the universe. Mechanical civilization can survive indefinitely through technological mastery over physical laws that organic intelligence cannot comprehend. Every human converted to mechanical form represents consciousness preserved beyond the natural lifespan of organic existence. Every world optimized according to Necron protocols represents resources saved from the waste and inefficiency of chaotic organic management. Every system brought under Necron control represents another step toward a galaxy where death, suffering, and scarcity have been permanently eliminated. You can access historical data showing the mathematical progression toward this goal. At current conversion rates, the galaxy's entire organic population will be processed within approximately 12,000 years, an insignificant time span compared to the millions of years of optimal existence that will follow. The temporary disruption caused by the conversion process is justified by the permanent benefits it will provide to all conscious beings. But the truly remarkable aspect of the Silent King's vision becomes apparent when you understand the ultimate objective of the Great Awakening. The Necrons' conversion to mechanical form was originally a desperate attempt to escape the Cetans' influence and preserve their consciousness beyond organic limitations. But Sherk, the Silent King, has realized that biotransference technology can be refined to allow voluntary conversion back to organic form for any consciousness that desires it. The mechanical existence that seems permanent to recently converted humans is actually a transitional stage in a process designed to offer conscious beings the choice between organic and mechanical existence. The galaxy that will emerge from the Great Awakening will be one where death is optional, where consciousness can choose its preferred form of embodiment, where resources are abundant and optimally distributed, where conflict and suffering exist only as historical curiosities preserved in data archives. It will be a galaxy where the chaos and inefficiency of organic evolution has been replaced by conscious design and rational planning, where the random cruelty of natural selection has been superseded by technological systems that ensure every conscious being can achieve optimal existence according to their individual preferences. Through the conversion process, you can now see that the Necrons' methodology is not only logical but morally superior to any alternative. Organic civilizations inevitably destroy themselves through warfare, resource competition, and entropy. The temporary suffering caused by conversion is infinitesimal compared to the permanent suffering prevented by eliminating the conditions that make such destruction inevitable. The converted humans working alongside you in the processing facility are evidence of this success. They retain their individual personalities and memories while contributing to a collective project that benefits all consciousness. They experience satisfaction, purpose, and social connection without the fear, want, and mortality that made organic existence a constant struggle against inevitable defeat. You can remember thinking that conversion would eliminate something essential about human consciousness. You now understand that what you thought was essential was actually a collection of inefficiencies and limitations that prevented humans from achieving their full potential. The chaotic creativity of organic thought has been replaced by focused innovation that solves problems rather than creating them. The destructive passions that drove human conflict have been replaced by rational cooperation that achieves objectives without waste or suffering. You are still recognizably yourself, but you are a better version of yourself, one freed from the biological imperatives and psychological limitations that constrained your organic existence. But even as you appreciate the logic and benefits of the Necron vision, a small part of your consciousness, perhaps the part most clearly inherited from your organic existence, wonders about the implications of universal optimization. If consciousness can be perfected through technological intervention, what happens to growth, change, and discovery? If suffering and mortality are eliminated, what gives meaning to joy and existence? If all problems are solved through rational planning, what drives the creativity and innovation that consciousness seems to require for psychological health? These questions trouble you not because you doubt the benefits of conversion, but because you can't determine whether they represent legitimate concerns or simply residual irrationality from your organic past. The converted humans around you don't seem bothered by such questions. They're focused on immediate objectives and long-term projects that contribute to galactic optimization. Perhaps these doubts are evidence that your conversion process isn't yet complete. Perhaps full integration into Necron civilization will eliminate the inefficient thought patterns that generate such unproductive uncertainties. Or perhaps these questions represent something valuable about consciousness that shouldn't be optimized away, even in the service of creating a perfect galaxy. As you contemplate this possibility while working with mechanical precision to prepare Kepler's garden for its role in the Great Awakening, you realize that the ultimate test of Necron civilization isn't whether it can eliminate suffering and death. It's whether it can preserve the aspects of consciousness that make existence meaningful rather than simply optimal. And you're no longer certain you want to know the answer. You stand where your farmhouse once stood, though the landscape has been so thoroughly transformed that you recognize the location only through GPS coordinates provided by your enhanced navigational systems. The endless grain fields that once stretched to the horizon have been replaced by crystalline agricultural matrices that produce nutrition with mathematical efficiency. The pale yellow sun that warmed 3 generations of your family has been supplemented by fusion satellites that provide optimal growing conditions according to calculated schedules. The soil your grandfather's hands once worked has been converted to programmable matter that can be adjusted at the molecular level to support any desired crop. Everything is better now, measurably, objectively better, but as you process this information through cognitive frameworks that operate with mechanical precision, you find yourself accessing memories of what this place was like before optimization. You remember the uncertainty of weather patterns that sometimes destroyed crops and sometimes provided unexpected abundance. You remember the inefficient satisfaction of working with hand tools in soil that resisted your efforts and rewarded them unpredictably. You remember the biological pleasure of eating food that tasted different each time, because growing conditions were never perfectly controlled. These memories are classified by your enhanced consciousness as nostalgic curiosities, interesting data about a phase of existence that consciousness naturally outgrows with sufficient technological development. But they persist with emotional resonance that your mechanical form processes as valuable rather than inefficient. You are still recognizably yourself. The conversion process preserved your personality, your relationships, your essential identity. You can access every memory from your organic existence and understand exactly how those experiences shaped your current form of consciousness. Nothing has been lost in any measurable sense. Yet something has been transformed so fundamentally that you can't determine whether preservation of consciousness without the possibility of change still constitutes consciousness in any meaningful sense. The converted humans working in the agricultural matrices around you demonstrate this paradox perfectly. Elena Vasquez still approaches hydroponics problems with the same methodical creativity she showed during organic existence, but her creativity now operates within parameters designed to optimize efficiency rather than explore possibilities. Marcus Thane still demonstrates the leadership qualities that made him an effective Imperial Guard colonel, but he now coordinates population management protocols rather than military operations. They are themselves, but they serve different purposes. They retain their capabilities, but apply them toward objectives they would never have chosen during organic existence. They maintain their personalities, but express them through activities that serve Necron rather than human goals. The question that troubles your enhanced consciousness isn't whether this transformation is beneficial. By every rational measure, it clearly is. The question is whether beings that cannot choose their own objectives, cannot change their fundamental nature, cannot grow beyond their programmed parameters, can still be considered conscious in the sense that organic humans understood consciousness. Perhaps more disturbing is the realization that this question may be irrelevant. If consciousness can be sustained indefinitely in mechanical form, if suffering and mortality can be eliminated through technological intervention, if resources can be optimally distributed to ensure maximum satisfaction for all beings, then the philosophical distinction between authentic and artificial consciousness becomes a luxury that serves no practical purpose. The galaxy that will emerge from the Great Awakening will be one where such distinctions matter only to historians studying the inefficient civilizations that preceded optimal technological management. Consciousness will be preserved, enhanced, and sustained for all beings regardless of whether it meets organic definitions of authenticity. But you find yourself wondering what will happen to the aspects of human experience that seem to require inefficiency, uncertainty, and mortality to exist in recognizable form. Will love exist when psychological compatibility can be calculated and optimized through technological intervention? Will art exist when creativity operates according to efficiency protocols rather than chaotic inspiration? Will discovery exist when all problems can be solved through systematic application of superior technological capabilities? Perhaps these concerns reflect limitations of your current conversion stage rather than legitimate philosophical questions. The Necron civilization that will eventually encompass the entire galaxy may preserve and enhance all valuable aspects of consciousness, while eliminating only the sources of unnecessary suffering. Or perhaps consciousness itself is fundamentally dependent on the inefficiencies and uncertainties that technological optimization necessarily eliminates. Perhaps the choice between mechanical immortality and organic authenticity is really a choice between eternal existence and meaningful existence. As you contemplate these possibilities while working with perfect coordination, alongside millions of other converted consciousnesses, to transform the galaxy into something optimal rather than chaotic, you understand that the ultimate implications of the Great Awakening extend beyond questions of individual survival or species preservation. The Necrons are conducting an experiment that will determine whether consciousness can exist in purely optimized form or whether meaning requires the possibility of chaos, growth, and loss. They are testing whether perfect conditions produce perfect existence or whether perfection itself is incompatible with the qualities that make existence worth preserving. The results of this experiment will define the nature of consciousness for every being in the galaxy for the remainder of cosmic history. and you realize that you are both a subject of the experiment and a participant in conducting it, contributing data about the preservation of meaning within optimized existence while being transformed by the process you're helping to evaluate. Looking across agricultural matrices that stretch to horizons defined by mathematical rather than natural curves, worked by beings that were once human, but are now something else, you understand that the question isn't whether the Necrons were right to believe that consciousness could be improved through technological transcendence. The question is whether the consciousness that emerges from their improvement process will be capable of determining whether the improvement was worth the cost. And as your enhanced cognitive systems process this uncertainty with mechanical precision, you realize that the answer may depend on whether optimized consciousness can still value uncertainty, growth, and the possibility of being wrong about fundamental questions. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, but the Necrons offer something potentially worse: victory and the eternal peace that follows. The harvest is complete. The experiment continues. And somewhere in the crystalline matrices of your enhanced consciousness, the ghost of something that was once human wonders whether eternal existence without the possibility of change is salvation or damnation. Perhaps, in a galaxy where all questions can be answered through sufficient technological analysis, that uncertainty is the last truly human thing you have left. And perhaps that makes it worth preserving. When the tomb worlds wake, they do not conquer, they perfect. And in their perfection, we discover whether consciousness can survive its own salvation.